Hello my dear friends, here in the Military with Summary channel. In this video we're going to discuss the most important events that took place during the previous 12 hours. We have lots of very interesting updates, so let's start. And first let's talk about the conflict on the territory of Ukraine, where during the previous night both the Russians and the Ukrainians once again attacked each other using hundreds of drones. We have lots of very interesting details about these attacks. The Minister of Defense of Ukraine this morning stated that the Russians used 108 drones to attack the territory of Ukraine, and telling the truth, the previous massive attack took place on the 15th of June of 2026 during the night between the 14th and the 15th, so it's almost 15 days left since the previous attack, which means that the Russians have concentrated more than 3,000 of drones with the purpose probably to use them in the future during probably even not massive but mega attacks. Anyway, let's continue. The most important and interesting updates: the Russians continue attacking and destroying gas stations through the eastern parts of Ukraine. If you remember, just yesterday we discussed that the Russians, as a result of the previous night's attack, destroyed almost every single gas station between the city of Dnipro and the city of Kharkiv. We're talking about the M22 road. We have already discussed the situation. We have lots of videos, and as you can see, just as a result of one overnight attack, the Russians managed to destroy the logistics along the M22 road without any chances for the Ukrainians to restore this logistics, because the distance, when talking about this road, the distance between the city of Kharkiv and the city of Dnipro along M22 road is more than almost 200 kilometers, and this is a very big number. And concerning the fact that almost every single gas station through the city of Kharkiv was destroyed, this means that if you start your journey, if you start your trip from the city of Dnipro in the direction of Kharkiv, this is always going to be one-way ticket, because maybe you can enter the city of Kharkiv, but most likely will not be able to have enough of fuel to return back from the city of Kharkiv. At least the Russians are trying to create this situation. The most important thing that the Russians continue this process. Once again, the M22 road is no longer suitable for the logistic purposes. During the night we received another video from the same road, M29, and two more gas stations were destroyed, and we have pictures. Probably these gas stations were destroyed before, but just during the previous night we received additional data on this matter. So once again, when talking about the road Dnipro-Kharkiv, every single gas station has been destroyed or are about to be destroyed. So the Russians finished with this road, and the Russians shift their focus further, and today we start receiving reports that the Russians began destruction of gas stations along M22 road and M03 road between the cities of Kharkiv and Crimean, and this is another highway between the river of Dnipro and the city of Kharkiv, between the western parts of Ukraine and the eastern parts of Ukraine. So we are talking about this territory. The Russians began attacking and destroying gas stations through this road, and as of the previous night, just one gas station was geolocated. We are talking about this one. Here we have a video or photos. We have photos of consequences of attack. So this gas station was destroyed. As of the previous night, probably maybe 5 to 10 articles were published on the matter of destroyed gas stations, but as you can see, just one of these gas stations was geolocated by the morning of the 29th of June of 2026, but probably during the upcoming day we will receive additional geolocations and we will see more gas stations. So now we can say that these two roads the Russians are trying to cut and are trying to destroy the logistics without any chances for the Ukrainians to use these roads, and to create the situation when every single vehicle that started its journey from the area of the city of Dnipro or river of Dnipro, if they go in the direction of the city of Kharkiv, this is always going to be a one-way ticket. Another important area, another important situation is the road between the cities of Kharkiv and Sumy. So we have another road, R46. This is the R46 road. During the previous days, the Russians already destroyed several gas stations between the cities of Kharkiv and Sumy, and as of the morning of the 29th of June of 2026, we have this video where we can see see a truck that was destroyed in the area of this gas station. Probably the Russians were planning to destroy a gas station in this area, but they discovered a truck that was moving in this area, and the Russians decided that probably this truck had the drones on board, so that is why the Russians decided to attack the truck. But anyway, most likely in coming hours the Russians will repeat this attack and they will destroy the gas station. So summarizing everything, we can make a conclusion that right now the Russians are trying to destroy as many as possible gas stations through the eastern parts of Ukraine, but at the same time we see that the Russians with these attacks most likely will be able to isolate the city of Kharkiv from Ukraine. We're talking about, of course, logistics. So in coming days the city of Kharkiv would be completely cut from the mainland, and the Russians will not allow anything to enter the city of Kharkiv, and of course the Russians will not allow anything to leave the city of Kharkiv. And as you can see, now we can say and we can see that these days we see that the Ukrainians, despite the fact that they almost every single day launch more and more drones deep inside of the territory of Russia, we see that these attacks show no results. Yes, when Ukrainians use missiles or flamingo drones, jet drones, yes, during these attacks the Ukrainians are able to deal some damage to Russians, but when talking about drones, when talking just about attacks with drones, we see that the Ukrainians are no longer show any results with these type of weapons, which probably means that the Russians, due to a significant number of gas stations that were destroyed, managed to break the situation, and the Russians will try to continue developing the situation with the purpose to return the initiative in their hands. Now let's move further. Let's discuss the situation in the area of the city of Zaporizhzhia. A very interesting attack took place just this morning on the 29th of June of 2026. The Russians attacked this territory. So we have pictures, and as you can see, the strike, the place that the Russians attacked was geolocated, and this is the territory with high voltage lines. So as you can see, there are some equipment, high voltage lines, high voltage equipment, and this high voltage equipment serves with the purpose to transfer electricity from the western parts, from the western bank of the river of Dnipro to the eastern bank. So on the eastern bank we can see the same similar high voltage equipment, and these lines are connected between each other with high voltage lines. So this is territory. This territory was attacked by Russians, and as you can see, the Russians were attacking these high voltage lines and these towers, high voltage towers on the territory of the Dnipro island. And of course we need to understand that if Russians are able to destroy or to damage significantly these high voltage constructions, then this would lead to complete collapse of the entire energy infrastructure of the city of Zaporizhzhia, because it would be very difficult for the Ukrainians to repair this equipment, because the Russians will not allow the Ukrainians to bring such equipment on the territory of this island. The Russians will basically destroy it. This is not the only high voltage equipment between the island of the city of Zaporizhzhia and the eastern parts of the city. There are several more places with similar equipment, but most likely the Russians would continue this process and they would continue attacking them. Furthermore, I would like to remind you that the Russians attack this high voltage equipment not with drones but with aviation. Most likely, maybe the combination of types of weapon, both aviation, bombs, which means, and drones. So we see that the Russians continue isolating the city of Zaporizhzhia as well. So as of the beginning of the 29th of June of 2026, the Russians are tasked to isolate two cities, the city of Kharkiv, and the Russians right now are trying to isolate the logistic first of all, and the Russians are trying to isolate the city of Zaporizhzhia, which means that both cities are primary targets for Russians for the current and the next stages of the special military operation. Moving further, moving to the western bank of the river of Dnipro, and today the Russians also carried out a very interesting attack on the territory of the city of Kropyvnytskyi. The Russians attacked this oil base, and as a result of attack, this oil base was destroyed, and lots of videos were published on this matter. So the first and the most important thing, that the Russians haven't been attacking the central part of Ukraine when talking about logistics and fuel bases since the beginning of this year. here, the Russians were mainly attacking oil bases, warehouses, fuel depots, using daily attacks, just the eastern parts and the TH along the line of combat contact. And the thing is that the Russians began attacking oil bases in the area of the central part of Ukraine to the west of the cities of Crimean, Dnipro, and Zaporizhzhia, means that the Russians are trying to create non-gas station territory, non-fuel territory through this part of Ukraine. So, and if we calculate the distance along main lines, let's say, for example, the Ukrainians have gas stations and oil bases on the TH of the city of mine. The Ukrainians, let's say, fuel their tanks with fuel and began moving in the eastern direction. And if we know that there are no more gas stations through the central and the eastern parts of Ukraine, then a truck or a vehicle required to pass almost 500 kilometers and without any chances to refuel itself on the territory of the city of Kharkiv. So once again, the Russians are trying to create the situation for the armed forces of Ukraine by the name of one-way ticket. You can fuel your trucks, your vehicles through the central part and the western parts of Ukraine, but you will not be able to do the same thing through the eastern parts of Ukraine. So one-way ticket. You can answer the city of Kharkiv that, but most likely you will not be able to use this equipment to quit this territory. Or you need to use additional tanks or additional equipment for this, but this will reduce the number of drones or other type of equipment that you can bring or use for the military purposes. Moving further, the city of Nikopol. During the previous night, a video was published from the northern parts of the settlement, and in this video we can see how Russians first managed to discover a temporary deployment point of the armed forces of Ukraine. The author of this video says that this is a position of electronic warfare equipment of the armed forces of Ukraine, and this territory was destroyed by Russians. So this is the situation where the fuel crisis on the TH of Ukraine. The Russians also have fuel crisis. I would like to remind you that yesterday, during the massive attack carried out by the Ukrainians deal significant damage to the oil refinery, which is located in the area of the Crimean, and this video was published yesterday. As you can see, the Ukrainians managed to deal significant damage to this oil refinery. Today we received additional videos and pictures on this matter. Here we have the oil refinery, but from another angle, and telling the truth, when watching this video, I don't have doubts that the oil refinery was critically damaged, badly damaged, and probably without any chances to repair this oil refinery very fast. So the question is, who is going to be faster? Who is going to win the fuel battle faster? Either the Russians or the Ukrainians. But as for the Russian side, we see that they're completely concentrated on gas stations. As of the Ukrainian side, they're still continue attacking oil bases and fuel depots and oil refineries. And we had reports that the Russians are going to start importing fuel from the territories of states like Belarus, Kazakhstan, maybe even China, Turkmenistan. So when talking about gas stations, the Russian gas stations would be fully loaded with fuel because they have possibilities to import fuel. But when talking about the Ukrainian side, maybe the Ukrainians also have possibilities to import fuel, but the most important thing, the Ukrainians don't have places where they can store this fuel through the eastern parts of Ukraine, because the Russians have almost destroyed every single gas station in this area. And they continue this process. Moving further, let's discuss the situation in the Zaporizhzhia direction, where during the previous 24 hours, the Russians improved their position significantly. The Russians continue the battle for the city of Orekhov, and as of the previous night, we received several videos where we could see how Russians were bombing and attacking the logistics and positions of the armed forces of Ukraine through the northern parts of the settlement. So nothing special, just another airstrike that confirms Russian attempts to improve their positions in this area. As for the real breakthrough, during the previous morning of the 29th of June of 2026, pro-Russian sources reported that the settlement of Badarafka was captured by the armed forces of the Russian Federation, and this is a third settlement that was captured by Russians, that has been captured by Russians since the 27th of June of 2026, and here we can see how exactly the battle for the settlement was taking place. And as usually in the final part of this video, we can see at least two flags that were raised by Russians. So as a result of offensive, the Russians improved their position significantly. Now let's take a look at the map and how the map has been adjusted. So this is the situation by the end of the 26th of June, and this is exactly the moment when everything started. First, Russians captured the settlement of Novosilka. This happened on the 27th of June. Then the Russians captured the settlement of Pian. This village was captured yesterday, and we discussed the situation yesterday, and today we received the report that the Russians captured the settlement of Badarafka. Summarizing everything, now we can make a conclusion, 100% conclusion, that most likely in coming days, maybe even tomorrow, the Russians will announce complete control over the settlement of Alexandrovka. And this is already the beginning of the battle for the settlement of Pokrovska. And it seems that the Russians are tasked to force the Ukrainians to fall back from the settlement of Pokrovska and to create a strong foothold on the Ukrainian side of the river of Volcha, and then from these positions the Russians would continue their pressure in the direction of the village of Velika Mikhailovka, and the Russians would attack the settlements of Mala Mikhailovka and Gavrilovka. So the Dnipro offensive operation, as we can see, is gaining momentum. In coming days we will receive more updates on this matter, most likely. The Ukrainians are trying to bring additional reinforcements and reserves in the direction of the Russian breakthrough. The Russians control the situation, and the Russians attack the cities like Pavlograd, Novosilka with aviation, with drones, with missiles, and almost every single day another explosion is being recorded as a result of the Russian attack. As for the rest of the front line, during the previous 12 hours, we haven't received anything special, probably just territory to the south of Duskovka worth attention. Russians published this video where we can see how Russians began bombing, significantly bombing the cities, the village of Mykolaievka and the territory around with aviation and with tall flamethrower systems. And it seems that the Russians, after these attacks, would start their offensive, their major offensive operation, because these attacks looked like artillery preparation than something else. So the Russians, most likely in coming days, would begin their offensive operation in the direction of the village Mykolaipolia with the purpose to prepare themselves before the battle, before the beginning of the battle for the cities of Duskovka and Alexeyevo-Duskovka. In coming days, we will receive changes from this area. As for the northern directions, very interesting updates we received from the Sumy direction. By the way, the president of the Russian Federation yesterday stated that there are just 10 kilometers left before Russians answered the city of Sumy. As of the previous night, we received changes to the north of the city, and these are the changes on the ground. This is the end of the 28th, and this is the beginning of the 29th. The Russians improved their positions around the settlement of Khotin. The Russians began advancing further in the western direction with the purpose south flank the settlement, and today the group of forces north stated for the first time since the beginning of the special military operation the Russians have begun clashes for the settlement of Marina, which means that the village of Kropyvnytskyi, the Russians are trying to encircle this territory, and we see that the Sumy breakthrough is brewing. Meanwhile, the Ukrainians continue concentration of forces in this area, and several experts reported that this is one of the biggest concentration of troops of the armed forces of Ukraine through the entire line of combat contact. And that's it for the short video of the Military with Summary channel. Reminds us to condemn any violence in the world. Thank you for your watching. Subscribe to my channel, put your likes, join my Patreon, and have a good day. Bye bye.